All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank Donna, Shin for being here. MBI is Midwest Brainspotting Institute is the sponsor for this event, and Donna was kind enough to share her knowledge with us today, and we appreciate it very much. A little introduction for Donna. She is a psychotherapist, a holistic wellness coach, author, and a woman with deep faith, specializing in helping spiritual survivors release the trauma and grief of emotional abuse in order to find meaning and grow with grace and dignity. That sounds like a wonderful practice. So that's Donna, and if you want to do any more introduction, you can. Otherwise, we can get going with the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Josh. I just want to say I can't see any people.
Oh yeah. So if you like to see people, if folks can throw on your cameras, if you
I
feel
can see the
comfortable with
people
that,
that are here.
yeah.
Guys, I'm having trouble with my video or
Oh, okay.
the camera. I don't know what's going on.
All right.
The, there's maybe if I there's a camera that has an X through it, Josh. Should I click on that to see the people?
No, actually, they have to turn on their video, their camera. So, like, some people like to have their cameras on, some people don't. So
Okay.
anybody
Josh,
that's willing to put it on, go ahead.
Thank you,
Sounds like
Sarah.
James sends
I
on
She's
some,
not.
just can't turn it on. I don't know why.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
technology.
Oh, it's so frustrating. I've had this happen before, and I never know why that is.
Yeah, it can be frustrating.
Yeah.
But I can hear you and see you, and that's what's important.
All right. Well, hopefully some faces will pop up so I
Okay.
can see who we're
Sorry
talking.
about
So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Josh, for that introduction. I am in Maryland on the East Coast this morning and really very honored to be sharing what I feel is such important information, especially in our world today, with narcissistic abuse. We hear so much about it, and it's kind of gotten to be a buzzword that people don't really understand, or
that.
even some are offended by. And so I hope this will be informational for you. And as we go through the slides, I just want to invite you to raise your hand, ask any questions that may come up. So we'll take care of that along the way. I'd be happy to answer what I can. So let me begin by sharing oop, that's not what I want to share. Let's see, sorry. Here, we want to share. I did it perfectly with you, Josh. Not sure what's happening here. So sorry. Um,
So you click the share screen, and then you don't see the PowerPoint on that pop
I
up
did
there.
actually. Let's see. Try that again.
Okay.
Oh, here it is.
Okay. All right.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
It's it looks like it's clicked on to the Home 365 at the top. If you click on the right side, it says Presentation 3 PPP or PPTX. If you click on that tab, I think it might pop up, maybe. Is that working?
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Good. Good morning. Are we ready?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. I apologize about that. Okay, so I've named my presentation today Brain Spotting with Narcissistic Abuse Recovery in Pathological Love Relationships. So I want to just say a couple of things about the use of language here. It's interesting because someone reached out to me in an email and they were a bit offended by the language that I used because, and I understood exactly what they were meaning, that pathologizing people and using these labels can be very dehumanizing. And I get that. And as a therapist myself, I don't like the labels, but I understand how important they are, especially in helping people recover from something like narcissistic abuse, because the various levels of, of psychopathology allow wounded souls to act inhumane at times and really hurt others. So we have to be honest and we have to be clinical and pastoral at the same time, if you will, and understand that this is a real thing. And people are wounded and unaware and really do hurt and cause a lot of chaos and pain for others. So, I mean, this is just the reality here. Okay, Josh, my screen will not move forward.
So you're clicking on the arrow buttons or that or hitting
Yep,
enter.
yep, yep, yep.
Hmm. Let's see. Hmm. I
It,
have
it
to.
was it was working just fine when
Yeah.
we did it before. What is going on? No, no. Hmm.
Wonder if you might need to like stop share and then share it again and see if that works.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Okay.
All right.
Everyone's seeing that. First things first screen. Okay. So when a client comes into the office, of course, like you're all very experienced therapists, I'm sure. So we do an intake. In looking and working with a client who comes in, you may not be able to identify right away what's going on with them. They may say, I'm having problems in my marriage, in my relationship. And so we listen and assess what's going on. But if they come in and they're very highly stressed, emotionally dysregulated, and they're sharing symptoms with you that we'll see later, it's a good indication that they've experienced some trauma. So we have to get clarity. We have to get clear with them, and they need clarity, and they need to be able to speak their truth, discern what their truth is, own it, and then that will lead to their awareness. And then that's where the pathology comes in, where we help them with education around these cluster B disorders. And then there's a lot of time here working through the grief and trauma that they've experienced, and that's where brain spotting comes in. And then the hope is that you can help your client make meaning of everything that they've experienced because it's now part of their story. Um, this is important at the bottom here. Clients often come in and say, I'm in a narcissistic relationship. And we say, well, how do you know that? Well, normally they'll say, well, I've watched a million videos and I see all this stuff on social media and online. And that can be super confusing to the client and stir them up in ways that we as their therapist really don't want them to continue to do. Um, Not everyone on social media is trained in this area. You know, there are coaches that have been through this and they may know a lot, but they may still be very angry and they may not be helpful. So, what does our client bring? Well, they bring a lot. You know, they have strengths. They have education, perhaps. They have past experiences. I like to check in with them on how they're taking care of themselves. I have this little mandala I use that helps us to discuss what they're doing for themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually in their current life. Are they balanced? Do they know how to take care of themselves? Do they have self-compassion? Um, I have a list of resources that I give to them, books, some videos on YouTube that I feel are clinically sound and helpful for them. Um, we have to offer them hope. It's very distressing and causes deep, deep turmoil and confusion and pain. This is a good place to discuss brain spotting. So I say, well, you know, I am trained in this amazing physiological brain body based trauma therapy that I think will be very important for us to use. And I may just begin the introduction of brain spotting here. So they know that this is something that they will experience and we will use in our work. Um, I'm a believer in all of our clients and our journeys with them being very sacred, of course, but this one, this one is really unique. So sometimes often clients, I feel like I'm going crazy. He makes me feel like I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. He's the crazy one. You hear all these kinds of things. And by the way, I have worked with men too. It's not just women who are coming in. Definitely more women, but some men too. Um, so we have to be realistic. This is going to take some time. Are you ready to really commit to doing this work for yourself? Um, we want to explain there's just so much to be gained through the recovery here: growth, coming back to yourself, wisdom, education. Validate for them. Yeah, yeah. You know, when somebody gaslights you or somebody's manipulating you, it does make you feel crazy. So there's also a lot of grief here. There are many losses incurred with a relationship ending. Of course, divorce, we all understand that. But in these types of traumas, and others, of course, too, there's a loss of self that can happen. I list some of the losses further down. Um, my A lot of my sharing today will come from my training with the Institute of Relational Harm. And this is a statistic from them. 90% of survivors of emotional abuse have some trauma-like symptoms. 50 to 75% have full-blown PTSD, or more likely complex PTSD. A lot of Sandra's work was done through Purdue University, and she is one of the only really well-researched clinicians in this field. I'm very thankful for her hard work. So definitely this is trauma-informed work. Okay, so the quality awareness that we have to gain for ourselves first and then help the client gain is, let's slide my thing over here. You
Donna,
can't.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we did have a question.
Sure,
And
sure.
unfortunately, the hand raising function is not showing up on any of our screens, not even mine to add it to it. So do you mind taking a question, or do you want to wait till a different time?
Happy to take the question. Yes.
Okay. So it's in the chat. It said I'm not seeing the hand raise function, but I would love to know what educational resources you'd recommend early on to help them start to understand what they have been through and how they have been affected.
Okay. So the question is about what resources could we offer to them to help them. So I have Sandra's book here, right here. This book is very excellent. It's called Women Who Love Psychopaths: Inside the Relationships of Inevitable Harm with Psychopaths, Sociopaths, and Narcissists. It's very comprehensive. Um, it's somewhat clinically written, but most of my clients understand it perfectly and, you know, relate. They feel very affirmed and excited about putting a name to something that they feel. I also will send them to look at Dr. Ramani's videos on YouTube. She is a clinical psychologist, and this is her specialty too. And she's extremely excellent at it and aware, and she's talking to the layperson, not another professional. She really helps people with things like boundaries. Are you with a narcissist? What you might be feeling, how to manage it. So she's very good. And there's another person I really like. Her name is Dr. Rhonda Freeman, and she has a website called neuroinstincts.com. And then there are quite a few other books on my website, or excuse me, on my Instagram, which is shin.donna. In the link tree there, I have a list of resources, and I have a whole list of books that I believe have been really helpful to people. So I hope that gives you somewhere to start. Okay, great, good. All right.
I just had a quick question for you, Donna, as well. You were talking about the grief that happens when you start to do this work and they start to recognize, the nature of the relationship and those kinds of things. Have you noticed a pattern that if people do actually do the work and they kind of work through this relationship and then go through the grief and things, do most of those relationships then eventually end? Or do some people stay in the relationship, but they're just able to manage it better because they've done their work and they're not as affected by it?
That's a really great question, Josh. And that depends a lot upon the partner that has been abusive and how much pathology they truly have, where they fall on that spectrum. You know, Sandra talks a lot about being unconscious. And so if someone is narcissistic and they're on the low end of the spectrum and they're they don't want to lose their marriage, for example, and they go into therapy and they do the work, and the therapist can help him become more aware. He can work on maybe his own developmental trauma. I've seen a couple of relationships, marriages in that situation where he is willing to go to therapy. He's willing to be genuine. He's not a, a narcissistic personality disorder that's going in there and being charming and lying and all of that nonsense, but can sincerely do the work of connecting. It's difficult for the spouse who's been abused. I would say most of these relationships end, and I would say that coming to that decision for many women is very, very difficult to end the relationship. And I always try to refer people to marital therapy first to see if that can help at all. Usually it doesn't. I will say that. It just depends if there's sociopathy there, if there's psychopathy there. All of those diagnoses have narcissism in them, but of course we know they're more severe. And people won't change because they don't feel like there's anything wrong with them. And so most end, but not all, and it depends.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Okay, so until your client, the survivor, understands what kind of relationship she was or is in, she may be acquiring information about dysfunctional relationships that just don't apply here. That's why it's dangerous to read every social media post and watch every video on YouTube. So the quality of awareness that we bring, the the pathology education, is what she's going to build her foundation on for her recovery. And so we want to listen to their story. Some of the things that you may hear from your client: they don't hear me, I'm being dismissed, it's always my fault, they're shaming. They don't realize that shame, but they'll say it's always my fault, and I'll say, so you feel like you're being shamed and blamed all the time? And they go, well, yeah. Gaslighting, people don't always understand what that is, so we may have to educate them, but they know what it feels like. They say often, he won't take responsibility for anything. Very rigid defenses they're coming up against usually, and these circular discussions that a client who's being abused will engage in with their partner, and it's a huge energy drain for them. So I may say something like, it sounds like you're using a lot of your precious energy to keep arguing with someone that you're not going to get anywhere with. And they're like, oh, yes. They understand the love bombing if that's happened to them. I don't even know who I am anymore, that loss of self. And one of the primary symptoms I see with abuse victims is they are in so much self-doubt and indecisiveness and confusion. Their partner has put them down and shamed them so much. It's taken a heavy toll. Okay, come on now. And my screen's stuck again. Come on. It is bizarre here. There we go. Okay, so we want to emphasize more on the client's symptoms and not their stories. They want to go around and around and around and tell you over and over, you know what he did today? Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what happened then. Some of that listening on our part is necessary. But once you feel like you have a good sense of the essence of what's going on there, we really want to help veer them back to what their pain is. What does that feel like? Um, and this is a great place to begin brain spotting. Let's brain spot on this fear, this powerlessness, this shame you feel, this self-doubt. And then we do our setup, right? We get our suds, we do the gaze spot or outside window. If you feel led to, you might want to do a body resource first. Most clients I've worked with are well within the window of tolerance, and they do really great with brain spotting. After a good introduction to it, and of course, our being there with them, right? That dual relationship. I really am a stickler for using the music. I love the music for the effect it has on the nervous system. I have a little Bose player in my office and headphones. And if I'm doing a virtual session, we all do that, right? You have them listen to the music a different way. Okay. The key symptom and the hardest symptom that we see in emotional abuse is cognitive dissonance. It is truly a mind mess. It's this remembering, thinking, I love him. I hate him. He's my soulmate. He makes me crazy. They are remembering and feeling, and it's in the brain. It is a trauma bond that is caused by the oxytocin and the the sucker punches that just have their brain going back and forth, up and down. So it's exhausting, it's exciting. I'm happy, I'm miserable. You know, when you hear these things, know that it's cognitive dissonance. And this is where our trauma therapy, like brain spotting, is very much needed.
I have a quick
Um,
question for you, Donna, if that's okay.
sure. Uh-huh.
Um, I read a book recently on cults, and but it was with an attachment perspective, which was super interesting. But what one thing that they said was that people in cults, they no matter what attachment style they come into the cult with, they will develop a disorganized attachment because they're attached. And they need the cult, but also they're afraid of the retribution and all those kinds of things. So there's always that push pull. And they said in the book that that's similar to what happens in a domestic violence relationship, that you can come in with any attachment style, but you'll end up usually with a disorganized attachment. And I'm wondering if this type of relationship is akin to a domestic violence relationship in that way, where like you were just describing. That's why I'm asking, is that I love them, I hate them, they're my soulmate, I can't stand them. Do they also in these types of relationships develop that disorganized attachment that you've be aware of or you've seen?
Thank you, Josh. I think that's a really good point. And I would say yes, yes. And the longer that someone stays in the abusive relationship, the more severe that can become, and the more lost and confused they can get. Thank you. It's a
Yeah,
great point.
thank you.
Sure. So, yeah, the traumatic bonding between survivors and their abusers involves complex neurobiological factors. Falling in love with someone, activates so many neurochemistry responses in our brain And then someone is activating the stress and they're getting a different message. And it's just so confusing. It can feel like withdrawal when someone is coming out of one of these relationships, because it is so connected in those neural pathways. It's just, it goes right to the dissonance. They're afraid. They're trying to be loving. They're trying to figure out how they can stay. They're trying to figure out how they can leave. They're leaving and then they're coming back and trying again. I can make this work. It can work. So again, as I said, continual replaying of the memories creates more trauma. While Sandra Brown also says, while simultaneously strengthening the rumination loop in the neural pathways of the brain. So we don't want that. We want to create those new neural pathways. And if they're ruminating on the painful memories, validate them. Can we brain spot on this? Just want to veer them away from that rumination. They're doing a lot of that on their own. I think I went backwards here for a minute. Okay. So yes, the foundation of recovery must be based on our correct understanding and information and the education we offer the client. We must address the necessity of self-care, understanding the pathology and how the grief and trauma have affected them. And don't forget, they need lots of big encouragements as they're making those small shifts and progress. So this is where we get into the pathology education a little more. All pathological relationships cause relational harm, which can manifest as personal harm. And based on the degree of, again, where their partner falls on that spectrum. It's imperative that all therapists doing this work have an understanding of the cluster B disorders to help educate their client. A client entangled in a pathological relationship will need enough information for herself to recognize, avoid, or leave the relationship. This involves looking at the level or degree, again, of personal functioning in the partner. These things can be helpful to understand in the pathology. How does a personality disordered person see himself? Like, oh, yeah, maybe that was hurtful, or, nah, I didn't do anything wrong. She always acts like that, you know? How he relates to others. How does his level of dysfunction impact his behavior, including his behavior within the relationship? These things start to become very apparent as we're working with them. So sharpening our lens is important here. I have specific tools in my toolbox that I have received from the Institute of Relational Harm for this work. So I have a partner-related traits pathometry checklist, and the 4 cluster Bs that it will show or indicate possible psychopathology is sociopath, psychopath, borderline personality disorder, and narcissism. So I give this early on in the process, and I tell them, I cannot diagnose your husband. I don't know him. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to help you and I understand these behaviors. And the checklist will indicate for us that he may have narcissism. He may fall in the psychopathy range. And these checklists are excellent and they're very eye-opening for clients. And it's helpful to keep referring back to them from time to time. Like they'll tell me something and I'll say, well, that would be a trait of someone being a sociopath. And we saw in your checklist that he may fall in that spectrum there. So this is a great opportunity for them to gain self-knowledge or heal their own developmental trauma at a deeper level. So when we start the brain spotting, we're trained to understand what's coming up for them. They may have gotten into this relationship because they had developmental trauma. Their blind spots, their unmet needs could be a factor here. So the 5-factor rating form, I'll talk about super traits in a minute, but the ACEs assessment can be helpful to understand your client better and maybe what they're bringing.
Donna, there was another question. Are you,
Sure.
is okay? It says, does this checklist apply for other relationships, like parental relationships?
Yes, indeed. I see people come in because of family relationships too. Absolutely. Great question. I've worked with mothers and daughters, daughters with narcissistic mothers, daughters with narcissistic fathers. More recently, I've been working with a family, and it's a sibling who's causing all kinds of chaos in the family. So, oh yeah, I gave the family, the mother and the 2 other siblings, the checklist. And it was interesting because the brother and sister mirror image their checklist, and the mother very different. So she's suffering. She has a lot of guilt. It's very, very hard for her. But anyway, it's a unique relationship that we're talking about with a pathological love relationship. There's trauma. There's atypical symptoms. The cognitive dissonance is huge. The cognitive dissonance is actually formed out of the trauma bond. These women and men, they end up feeling really horrible about themselves. They don't trust their intuition. They don't trust their ability to love again or to even choose a healthy partner. So it's really, really difficult. Prolonged trauma and dissonance can change the physical health of the body. We know that, right? Trauma, pathological love relationships can cause adrenal, thyroid, metabolic, and immune disorders. Sometimes people come in with these autoimmune issues, and I file that and say, I wonder if the stress is and the trauma is just really causing their body to speak to them. Cognitive decline, that is a neurological issue that happens in the brain from the cognitive dissonance. The focused mindfulness and bilateral music used in the brain spotting frame can be calming to the nervous system. Love the music. Thinking processes, cognitive impairment, high cortisol levels, chronic stress, complex PTSD tell us why the survivors need trauma-informed care and brain spotting. The earlier the interventions, the better the outcomes. The survivor needs so much validation. There was nothing the survivor could have done to have a happy ever after with this partner. If that partner is truly a sociopath or a psychopath or has narcissistic personality disorder, it's very rare that they will change. I'm not saying it couldn't happen by a miracle of God, or if they decide to do really, really hard work for the rest of their life on themselves. I don't think there are absolutes, but I would say in most cases, you just can't change a person. The only one you can change is yourself. So they need lots of validation. Know that constant validation seeking might be a form of unresolved cognitive dissonance. So, we want to validate them, but again, we don't want to get carried away with their stories. These are some of the feelings, the symptoms that we see them show up with. I would say all of them, most of the time. In the beginning, anyway, the shock wears off after a while, after they've been in therapy and they get some education. Definitely, they don't feel safe. Okay, regular brain spotting in sessions. 2, help the client regulate the nervous system, help them gain clarity and trust for truth, gain insight. We know brain spotting brings insight, which is amazing, right? And they may come in the next week and say, I realized I'm not the crazy one, for example, or I realized that I've been doing this and letting him get away with it, whatever. But they start getting it, and that really is exciting. And so they're releasing, they're getting more empowered, they're getting their power back. And it helps us, right? Identify any unresolved developmental trauma, support them in becoming more conscious of themselves. Follow the comet. We know that. That's part of our training. It's hard, we want to make assumptions and kind of lead them forward, but that wait, right? We need to wait. Okay, this is not a normal breakup. Systems in the brain impaired during love and normal breakups have been identified. With the pathological partner, these systems are greatly intensified. This is based on the research of anthropologist and human behavior expert Helen Fisher. The brain is impaired in thinking problems arising from cognitive dissonance that can include remembering, judgment, and reasoning. Survivors often report brain fog or having, I think I need to say incoherent thoughts there. Trauma damages the executive functioning in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So they may have problems with attention, restraint, impulsivity, memory, reasoning, decision-making, problem solving, and planning. When the limitations and deficits of the partner have been established, it then becomes time to disengage from the topic of pathology. It can take a while to get there, but really not too long. With the education, she's working hard, he's working hard, they're connecting things, they're having insights, they feel safe in therapy with you, and they're working hard. So they're making progress. But we have to remind them they're up against a really difficult person here, very antagonistic person, most likely. And that helps the dissonance decrease. The brain spotting helps it decrease more than anything. They need that. It slowly does decrease. Okay. The neurology of trust here. So I mentioned some of this. Elevated levels of oxytocin, the love bombing hormone wreak havoc with the alternating cortisol that overwhelms the survivor's brain. The love bombing frequent, the love bombing with the sucker punches, I call them. It's intense. Like, you know, you're happy in the relationship, you're going about your day, and all of a sudden the partner just says something that is like, what? Makes you feel like, what are you talking about? And it's shaming and it's blaming, and it cuts right to the heart, and it feels like a sucker punch. This creates a subcortical accumulation of these frozen capsules of trauma that the brain spotting can help. Yeah, they go through shock, despair, and fear. All this causes the fight, flight, freeze response in the body that we're familiar with. This is a really interesting aspect here that I was fascinated by when I learned. So, Sandra Brown, in her research, coined this phrase, super traits. And this has to do with your client's way of being. So, she recognized using different inventories that many people, many partners, survivors who are with abusive partners have these elevated character traits of agreeableness and cooperativeness. And so I use the 5-factor form to help see and show the client whether they may have some of these super traits. So these relationship investment traits are naturally beneficial and respected when invested in the right relationship. These are people who we know that are warm, sociable, likable, friendly, tolerant of others. They're lovely people. The survivor's ability to adapt to a known or unknown pathology is really just innately in her personality. It's not a conscious decision to people please, but rather a naturally occurring, sorry, my typo, element of their personality. So relative normalcy plus pathology equals inevitable harm. Agreeableness then is the trait by which darkness, cluster Bs, draw her in, and conscientiousness is the trait by which he retains her. Let's do some brain spotting on these super traits. So your client comes up on the 5-factor inventory to have strong agreeableness and conscientiousness, cooperativeness. Let's help her own those. Let's help her feel empowered. I'm a good person. I'm a sweetheart. Somebody just took advantage of me. And I need to learn boundaries and get wiser here for next time. But this is who I am, and this is okay. They're lovely traits, really. And it helps them forgive themselves. And they can learn to love these parts and wear them well. This was a little bit surprising to me because a lot of what we hear out there in our social media, online, all of that is that women who get involved with psychopathology, cluster B partners are codependent. And Sandra's research showed it was not applicable to approximately 75% of survivors. Consider the client's family of origin. Did they have dysfunctional families, come from alcoholic homes, or suffer from abuse? The ACEs checklist can help there. If all that's true, if the ACEs are high, if what you're hearing tells you they have developmental trauma, what's coming up in brain spotting affirms that codependency might be there. Codependency is learned. Super traits are an innate predisposition. They're hardwired. So again, the brain spotting can help uncover the developmental trauma. Okay. Unless the client uses the natural process of grief in a healthy way to grow and transform, they may live as a victim or get stuck in their grief. The goal is to work through the reality and often shock of the encounter. Shock and numbness and all of that is an early stage of grief. Grief is important. 3 primary emotions in grief are anger, sadness, and guilt. And we hear all of these in our work. We hear them definitely in this type of recovery. So going through a normal, healthy grief process with them, they're going to gain acceptance, but not only of what happened, but of themselves. Okay. I mentioned losses earlier. Here are a bunch of the losses, many losses that I have seen show up in these relationships. I would say the things that are unique for abuse in a pathological love relationship, the loss of a dream, loss of their family, wasted time, loss of health. They might lose their home, financial problems, loss of ability to be present with their kids, the cognitive dissonance. So I'm curious, have any of you used brain spotting with grief? Grief comes up often, right, in our client work. It's kind of foundational, I believe, to many things. But with you, the attuned therapist, that client can experience deep release from their brain and body, bringing them more energy, a new space, bringing their power back. We follow the comet, we wait, we're silent as the client grieves their assumptive world and begins to integrate their new normal. I imagine many of you get asked, like I do, how long is this going to take? Well, it takes as long as it takes, right? Okay, so we're moving forward with our client. The brain spotting is helping immensely. It helps the survivor of emotional abuse. It helps them, it allows deep and rapid truths to come forth and bring clarity about the situation, themselves, the abuser. Sometimes, if it's developmental trauma, it brings clarity about what they experienced growing up. So it can help heal those older frozen pieces. And it helps them learn if they had vulnerabilities going into the relationship that caused them to miss or override red flags. I hear this a lot. People say, I had red flags. I knew something was off. And we'll talk about that. How did they know? What were the red flags? Why did they override them? Why didn't they listen to their body or themselves? I personally believe these clients have lived through Joseph Campbell's hero's journey if you're familiar with that, and a dark night of their soul. It's totally transforming for our clients to go through this kind of trauma, grief, and pain and learn from it. I love this picture because to me it represented the little girl in in so many women that I've worked with, that is just embracing her true self again, dealing with old stuff maybe, or just owning how beautiful she is and how precious. So the object is to achieve a gentle life in which the survivor recognizes the hypervigilant trauma her mind and body have been through, with an eye towards self-care, making mental and physical health a priority, rebuilding those parts of her life that were ravaged by pathology. I would add, and it's my bias, but making her spiritual life a priority too. It can be a very big asset for her if she has that relationship with a higher power. So for us as clinicians, it's a good question to ask ourselves. If someone comes in and wants and needs help with this, how do we understand narcissism and pathology and sociopathy, psychopathy? Well, we have our DSM-5, right? So there's that categorical view or the alternative view. In this field, the research shows that it's more complex and the traits are overlapping. So a sociopath, as I said, will have narcissism. A psychopath will have narcissism. Sometimes there's borderline traits in there. So we can't lump all these abusers together. They have unique pathology, they're unique individuals, and we can't fully diagnose them, but we can have that understanding in our toolbox. So many survivors feel guilty. I should have known. I hurt my children. I wasted my time. There's something wrong with me for getting involved with these people. That's how they feel about themselves often, but they also come often to a place of feeling sorry for or even compassion for the abuser. They begin to see their abuser as a truly wounded soul or unconscious soul or a highly defensive soul who's never going to change. And that can be helpful for them to see that, to start to feel sorry for them. We don't want them to stay angry forever. That's not healthy. We want them to move through that grief process and learn from all of this. So the client may also need help in forgiving themselves for the hurt their involvement caused, as I said, others, children, themselves. Many women, men too, they work too hard to try to stay with the abuser. They were living for the potential of who they thought that person could be. I tried so hard to keep my family intact, but I couldn't. So this is actually my last slide here, and it is an honor to work and engage with people in this place. Carolyn Mace is one of my favorite authors, and she says, First, the grace, like a fragrant cologne, is given to us to heal ourselves. And then when we are clear enough, it flows through us like a potent perfume to heal others. So, a little bit of personal disclosure here. If you haven't picked this up already, you all are very intuitive, I'm sure. I have been through this myself. I've been through it in my family of origin with a narcissistic father, and I went through it in a marriage with a very complex partner who had pathology. And I started my career in specializing with grief and loss, and then went to trauma. Then, of course, was fortunate enough to find Brainspotting and get certified in that. And after I had my own experience in the marriage, but didn't make it, um, I had to leave that marriage. And I did a lot of my own work. I have created this specialty and gotten the training in it. And I just want to share, well, this is my book. I wrote a book in August. I was published last August. And so there's a selfish plug for my book, My Mystical Path, a memoir of finding grace and dignity in life's hardest lessons. If any of you are interested in the training that I have had on PESI, which I think you all are familiar with, where we can go in and get continuing education. Sandra Brown, her first continuing education webinar was called Narcissism and Psychopathic Abuse, a clinician's guide to the new field of traumatic path and love relationships. And that one's shorter, it's less expensive, and it's very educational, I think, for anyone who wants to work in this field or is finding themselves with these types of client needs. The deeper dive into the treatment, which I'm still finishing, it's a lot of work, is called, and this one's more expensive and has lots of CE credits, is called the Ultimate Trauma Treatment Certification, Blueprint for Greater Therapeutic Success for Clients with Complex Trauma. So
Thank you for those resources. I'm wondering, the Sandra Brown books, I just looked it up real quick. Like I said, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Looks like there's a few with Sandra Brown in there, but I'm not sure if there's different people named that. So, Brown's common name. So there's one called Out of Nowhere, one called How to Spot a Dangerous Man Before You Get Involved. My guess is that's her.
that's her,
Okay.
yes.
And then one called Overkill and one called Blood Mood. I'm guessing those are not her.
No, no.
So, okay.
Her, this book that I'm sharing and recommend here, I think it's in its third edition, Women Who Love Psychopaths. It's good for men too. I mean, it's great for our education. It's very, very well researched, well done, gives so many examples. It's really very, very rich for a clinician or a client. So I wonder if anyone has any more questions or comments. Happy to answer if I can.
I wonder, does this work if you raise your hand on the screen? Sometimes, yeah, if you raise your hand long enough, if you're on screen, it'll actually raise a hand, and so you don't have to click the button. Looks like Sarah has a question.
Hi, Sarah. Yes.
Hi there. I really appreciate the timing of this presentation. And as someone who's been in private practice for a long time and doing Brainspotting for like the past 5 or 6 years, this is a issue that I have dealt with quite a bit. with my clients. But I would say even more so like the developmental trauma from narcissistic parents. And again, I really appreciate the resources because, as you've said, there is just so much out there. And, you know, for someone that is coming in cold, who has never had therapy before, who's been diagnosed with depression and anxiety for years and years and years and years. And it's usually when they're hitting perimenopause, you know? So in their 40s, 50s.
Midlife too.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, I'm seeing it. As I'm assessing and gathering information and listening. And, you know, if I ask about trauma, if I ask about, you know, is this something you've worked on in therapy in the past? And they'll say, no, I was told like my husband's just the problem, or, you know, just prescribed antidepressants. And again, they're not in a great place. So I find myself, I still haven't figured out kind of like that perfect intro to gently, you know, start introducing some of these concepts, because I feel like it's a fire hose, you know, and I don't want to scare them off. I don't want to alienate them. I don't want to overwhelm them more than they already are.
Yeah.
So, I love so many slides in this, just super helpful. And I'm just like taking notes, even though I know some of this. I feel like this has just been an excellent summation and kind of organization of this process. So maybe there's a question in there. It's my guess is more of a comment, but
I think I heard a question.
Yeah, just having some very gentle, you know, introductions to this is not your fault. Like, this sounds like complex PTSD, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your questions because we don't want to blow them away with the fire hose by starting to talk about, oh, your partner might be a psychopath or whatever.
Right. Here, take this book home, put it next to your bed.
Right.
You know,
Especially if they're not even in that radar yet, right?
Right.
So one thing I might suggest there, Sarah, is let's talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. And let's talk about some things that might go on in an unhealthy relationship. And that may spark some awareness in your client about the unhealthy, like an unhealthy partner doesn't listen to you. He doesn't take responsibility. In a healthy marriage, both people communicate and are able to say how they feel and what they need and be heard and repair conflict. And, you know, that may be helpful. And then once you get a little further along and your intuition is telling you this might be an abusive relationship, then you gently start, you know, talking about her symptoms, and well, she's bringing symptoms right away.
Right. And I love the idea of introducing them to resourcing and, you know, starting to explain some of the physiology of, I'll call it stress, you know, they have all kinds of stress. And, you know, trying to, because there's just so much, in my opinion, physiological damage, as you described, that oftentimes those are the presenting problems. You know, I have irritable bowel syndrome. I just can't, you know, I'm just exhausted all the time. And yet, you know.
And don't you feel like if you do brain spotting on some of that, that if there is abuse going on, that some trauma from that abuse is likely to come up.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. Like, when do they feel it? When is it the worst?
mhm.
And it's usually, well, when I'm waiting for him to come home from work,
Where she's
and
had
then,
a memory, like right now I'm thinking about my husband screaming at me, or
mhm,
what he said to me, or
yeah,
something.
yeah. So yeah, thank you for that.
Well, I want to share with you, if you're on Instagram, if you look at my page, Shin.Donna, under my resources on Linktree, I have books for dealing with narcissistic family member. Um,
Great.
so that may be helpful.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I like
Thank you
that.
for.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just kind of admiring that idea of like introducing it gently as far as like healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships, because then you can kind of easily make the transition to, if it is an unhealthy relationship, it takes two to tango. So what do you think your part is? What do you think the other person's part is? And then like, oh, what if their part is this and this, what do you think creates that in somebody's background? And then you can start getting into what their symptoms are, where it might come from, and like, getting into what's up with them. So I like that gentle, process.
Great. Yeah. Another website that's really good is she's a marital marriage and family therapist out in California. Her name is Darlene Lancer. She does a lot around narcissism. She does a lot around codependency and narcissism too. She's not into or at least I haven't heard her talk about super traits, but she has a lot of good articles on her website. That I've given clients some things just that she has in her resources about gaslighting. And sometimes I remember a man I was working with, and I gave him an article about gaslighting, and he came back and said, exactly, this is what's happening to me. So there's so much out there that can be helpful. Anyone else have a question?
This is Jane. Again, sorry for my camera. I don't know what's going on.
Hi, Jane.
I really appreciate the presentation. I have several clients who are working through this very, issue.
Mm.
Brainspotting has really helped, especially one client who, oh my gosh, she came in it was last week or the week before, and she's always had this issue with swallowing. And we know we have been working on narcissism. I mean, there are developmental issues with narcissism from the get-go, from her parents. Anyway, so it's like 60 years of not being heard, seen, presenting with depersonalization, derealization, even at a very tender age, like middle school. And parents just called it, well, you're just nervous. And, disregarding all of the dysfunction that was in the family. But anyway, back to the swallowing. She's had this issue with swallowing. When she came in my office, she says, I just can't swallow. I can't swallow. I can't swallow. And so we did some brain spotting, and it was amazing how much it loosened up all of that stuff that she couldn't swallow anymore. The things that she had taken in from parents, her boyfriend, her husband of 40 some years, who was, yeah, again, I can't diagnose him because I don't know him, but, just all the things that you had talked about in your presentation that he has done to her. And the issue with swallowing went away. It was pretty amazing.
Oh,
So
wow.
I just want to thank you for doing this, because I think it really helps us who are dealing with it really kind of validate everything. Um,
Yeah, you're very welcome.
yeah,
And
yeah,
continued success with your client. When you
yeah,
said about the swallowing, the first thing I thought was, she can't speak. She can't talk,
yeah.
she can't
She
defend
can
herself.
speak, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
but
it really helped her.
yeah,
Beautifully.
we're so fearfully and wonderfully made and so connected, right? The body,
Mhm,
um, it just really will speak to us,
mhm.
tries to get our attention. Anyone else?
Right. Well, Donna, I want to thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom. I learned a lot from this, and I'm trying to put it all together with all of my clients that might be in similar situations and thinking about future clients and how I might go about this. So thank you so much. And thank you for the participants that showed up today. Looking forward to reading your book. So, everybody go ahead and check that out. And thank you for all those resources. It's been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And I just want to encourage anyone, if they have any other questions or things come up, um, just feel free to email me or, get in touch, and I'll do whatever I can to help you, and keep doing this amazing modality of brain spotting. It's just the best, as we know. So thank you for having me, Josh. It's great to be with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah,
You're
and
very welcome.
the recording will be available to everybody within about a week or so. It usually takes me that long to figure out how to get it all together. So if you're looking for the recording, it will be up. I'll send you all a link because you're already on the list, and then I'm going to put it up on our website as well. So if you're looking for that, it'll be, I'd say a week to 10 days it will be in. All right.